game should have a bell curve, be that player activity, sales, whatever. It should just do that, and then you should just die quietly and go do something else, right? And yeah, the truth is, RuneScape hit that inflection point about 2007. It was growing really, really strong. I don't think we could have done anything to mess it up, even though we clearly did.
A lot of people remember the year 2012 as one of the worst in RuneScape's history. With it brought the evolution of combat, Squeal of Fortune, and Solomon's Store. Coincidentally, it was the same year Paul and Andrew Gower, two of the game's original creators, stepped down from the board of directors at Jagex and were replaced with investment firms. This is a story of how management may have intentionally held Old School RuneScape back. Before we get to that though, we do have a sponsor for today's video. It's a little unusual, but stick with it.
Essential oils, aromas for natural wellness and healing. But current products aren't made for gamers. Now there's a better way to holistically improve your game with sense-like strategy, kill-death ratio, and dominance. All of them mostly safe and distilled using nature science.
You what?
Well, at least it's not another Raid Shadow Legends ad, am I right?
Psych!
This video is actually brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. Raid is a free-to-play hero collection RPG available on, get this, both mobile and PC devices. This way you have multiple ways to play and make sure you're able to participate in their daily login rewards program. And now, for new players, it's been doubled from 90 days to 180 days. Each day you can claim your free rewards from energy refills, silver and gems, to shards, and a free Barbarian Legendary Champion, Syl of the Drake. If you're a new player, go to the video description, click on the special links, and you'll get 100,000 silver, 50 gems, 1 energy refill, and 1 free champion, Adjudicator, an extremely good champion for new players. All these rewards can be found in your in-game inbox right here, and are only available for the next 30 days. Thank you again to Raid for sponsoring this video. And no, the oils shown earlier don't actually exist. Before I get started, I do want to remind you that this is just a theory. I've gathered as much evidence as I can on this topic, but don't take it entirely as fact, especially because some JMods have refuted it. So let's rewind back to the 24th of February 2006. We feel your status in real life shouldn't affect your ability to be successful in RuneScape. This is from a news post on the RuneScape website about real-world trade. It's a phrase that many players who were around then and even now are likely familiar with. A few years later, in January 2012, the last two Gower brothers on the board stepped down. An investment firm known as IVP became the lead shareholder, owning 55% of the company, and 2 other firms took the Gower seats. At first, players were hopeful, but, obviously concerned. The game's creators were gone, and outside companies now had complete control over Jagex. Roughly a month later, the Squeal of Fortune was introduced. For those unfamiliar, it was a daily activity where players could spin this wheel and be rewarded with weapons, armor, XP lamps, and coins. You were able to purchase additional spins for about 50 cents each. 5 months later, Solomon's Store was launched, which allows players to purchase cosmetic overrides, pets, and all sorts of stuff in exchange for real-life money in the form of Jagex's own little currency called Rune Coins. Players that remembered, we feel your status in real life shouldn't affect your ability to be successful in RuneScape were, well, to put it simply, they were pissed.
Hello, fellow Jagex slaves.
So let's fast forward again a bit to the release of Old School. Pretty much nobody in corporate actually cared. Everyone, even the people working on Old School, believed it wouldn't be around for more than half a year.
Because the way I saw it, I had 6 months left at Jagex. I could spend 6 months in the publishing department before it got canned, because I'd run out of money, or I could spend 6 months working on something I really was passionate about, which was Old School. Everybody expected it to die in 6 months. Nobody was paying the blindest bit of attention to us. We had a meeting once a week with a project manager that didn't honestly care about what we were doing and thought it was a waste of time spending half an hour talking to us.
As a result, the team was seemingly built around that mentality because it really only had 4 developers for the first year. Even after that, for years, Old School had a handful of JMods working on it, while RS3 had hundreds. Even when Old School started consistently passing RS3 in terms of player count by a significant amount, less than 15 mods were assigned to Old School. A Reddit user by the name RNG Greed came up with the theory that 1. Upper management is milking Old School for what we're worth by inputting as few resources as possible, or 2. Upper management is terrified that Old School will strongly surpass RS3 in player count. And a lot of players agreed, as the post got to 800 upvotes, which was pretty significant for the time. I've used this thread along with a lot of others to compile some main points from the community at the time. Number 1, understaffing. Do you remember the old engine work meme? A huge chunk of requests back in 2013 to 2015-ish were denied solely because it would require changes to the game engine. At the time, Ian Gower was the only engine developer and was backed up on months of work. OSRS used to not have any graphical artists, which is why a lot of early content is reskins of old or unused content. There were no web developers, so the website was updated in spare time, and the game was seemingly riddled with bugs. Last week, they realized that some of the hidden bonus rewards didn't actually exist, such as the Motherlode Mine Pay Dirt boost and Catherby Herb Patch boost. Not to mention, getting any sort of update to the game's client was, and kind of still is in a way, unheard of. OSRS is so understaffed that a third-party client has been outsourced to do a lot of client features, where you must pay to access many of those features. This is in reference to OS Buddy, which at the time was the top third-party client. 2 types of content and reskins. Due to having an extremely limited amount of developers, we end up getting only a few types of content. This has led to some people calling OSRS PVMscape. At the time of this post, about 2.5 years after Old School's release, there were only 3 skilling related pieces of content released: Motherlode Mine, Rooftop Agility, and Achievement Diaries. Meanwhile, the game had received about 10 PVM based pieces of content, Elite Clues, Iron Man mode, Free to Play, and Resizable mode. Most of the members' content, like I mentioned earlier, were reskins of old content as well. For example, Kraken, Nightmare Zone, every wilderness boss, and so on. Not to put that on the Old School team, because they really made what they had work. They simply didn't have the tools to make new kinds of content. In fact, when OSRS first opened, there wasn't even a basic map editor. This is why the first real update didn't happen for 8 months after release, and that was Nightmare Zone. 3. Community input was disregarded. Old School was started with the premise that everything that goes into the game is decided by the players through the polling system. Many thread authors seem to say that Jagex didn't recognize problems until there was enough community outrage. For example, one author complains that input from the community about issues isn't recognized until it's too late. For example, Nightmare Zone and Splashing were considered broken for about a year before Jagex asked for input in a poll. Another example is that Jagex will ask the community for input and then ignore it. You used to be able to trade magic and profit off of it by the free runes you got in Nightmare Zone. Jagex did a poll asking if this should be removed, and despite it failing the poll, it was still changed. The author is upset that Jagex will ask players for their opinion, and then just do whatever they seem fit regardless of what the polls say. The same issue has bubbled up again with the Vesta's Longsword drama, as it's failed polls 3 times, and is still planned to be implemented. 4. Free-to-play was impossible. According to another Reddit user, Jagex says they may release free-to-play when bots have been cleaned up, by stating that they are essentially saying they will never implement free-to-play. Originally, this was the plan, but Jagex came up with a solution. Free-to-play could only be introduced if membership bonds were also introduced. In fact, this graph they posted in the discussion shows if they introduce free-to-play without bonds, it would somehow cause the game to shrink in the long run. So Jagex ran the poll as one question: should we add a full and permanent free-to-play service alongside membership bonds? And it passed with 85%. If I'm being honest, myself and many others don't believe that bonds would have passed if it wasn't for free-to-play. If you look at free-to-play worlds, even today, they're jam-packed with bots, which is exactly what Jagex and the players were afraid of. 5. Microtransaction Pressure. Every game has microtransaction pressure from investors when it comes to modern MMOs. It's really a miracle that bonds are the only form of it that exists in Old School, and personally they're not even that bad. I believe had it not been for the staff working on Old School and other Jagex employees passionate about it, the game would be ringed of all the money it could generate and slowly die. The reason I say this is because of MapleStory. The lead investment firm at Jagex at the time also purchased MapleStory and managed to absolutely destroy the game. They more or less milked it until they couldn't anymore. According to most of the players, the game quickly became pay to win and survived on whales who purchased tons of in-game benefits from them. They've since had to reboot the game in multiple forms. If you'd like, I know it's not Old School related, but I'm very interested in making a video about that as well and deep diving into it. Anyway, I think before we get to the conclusion of this video, MonMacK summarizes the MTX pressure pretty well.
In your time at Jagex, was there any internal pressure to try and monetize Old School?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There wouldn't be a company if there wasn't. A company has to look at how it can maximize the money it comes. That's just basically it. You forget about the products that it creates. If a company doesn't make money, company goes bust. So which means pressure for MTX has gone into Old School. Absolutely was going to happen. I've had conversations with people who have demanded that it goes in. I've had conversations with people who said if it doesn't go in, the company's going to go bust. I've had multiple conversations on that thing where huge pressure has been put in to make it happen. But one of the things that I'm sort of really proud about is no matter what pressure comes down to me, if I go down to the team and say, right, or I went down to the team and said, right, we're putting in MTX, those guys would push back on me. There's been so much pressure from so many of the people I mentioned earlier that the company got incredibly top heavy with leadership. And the people that were coming in were asking the right questions from their point of view. You'd have a director of marketing come in that would say, right, I have done this in other games and it has made us millions and millions of pounds. It's like, that's great, well done, but our game's different. If we were to do that in game, we'd lose £100 million a week.
In conclusion, Old School is meant to die after 6 months and would have been a quick nostalgia cash grab. Players believe management was understaffing Old School on purpose, and almost no trust was placed in Jagex in terms of update stability, and the polling system. The main reason microtransactions haven't come to Old School is because of the passionate team backing the game, and potentially due to Jagex having different investors. To investors, it would make a lot of sense to put microtransactions into Old School with how well it performed in RS3. Although their player base dipped a lot, they're making a lot of money compared to Old School. We don't have exact numbers, but they might even be making more. Luckily for us, the investors we have right now seem to understand that microtransactions simply won't work with Old School. So let me know your thoughts on this theory below. Do you think Old School was purposely held back by management, or was this just maybe a case of a miscommunication or mismanagement? Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.